All right, boys and girls, we got another book report. And as you can tell, got the Luv Ya Blue, the Houston Oilers, got my Earl Cambell jersey, my hero, my favorite football player, period. Um, Found this book. And in today's book report, it is about the Tyler Rose known as Earl Cambell. The Earl Cambell story, the Tyler Rose. And it was written, it's kind of autobiographical, if I can say that correctly. Authorized biography by a gentleman named Paddy Joe Miller. He's actually written a few books. Now this came out. What year did this come out? This came out in '97. So there's a few things that have happened to Earl, and a lot of it has to do with health. But anyway, let's start off. First of all, it's a fantastic book. If you're a Longhorn fan, if you're an Oiler fan, if you're an Earl Cambell fan, and if you're a fan of just good people, this is a good book. And one of the things, when am I an Oiler fan? Look at this. Am I an Oiler fan? One of the original looking helmets, right? I've got some other paraphernalia, but yeah, I was a hardcore Oiler fan. Columbia Blue still goes through these veins. Anyway, this book, I was anxious to read it. It's an easy read. Kind of go through it. It's about 211 pages or so. And I did write a few notes here to make sure I didn't forget stuff here that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned. Earl was one of 11 kids, 7 boys, 4 girls. And his father passed away when he was young. And it left a big impression on him. When later on there's a family friend that passes away, and he just didn't want to go to the funeral because how it affected him. And I guess that could be understandable. But his mom, Ann, amazing lady, just an amazing lady. They obviously lived in Tyler, if you're calling him the Tyler Rose, right? And amazing high school player. He started out as a defensive player. He was a linebacker. But think about it. He's like 5'11". How many linebackers are 5'11"? So in high school, it's when they switched him to running back. And that's the rest of the story. He incredible running back in high school. And he got recruited by several schools, including University of Texas, the Longhorns. And at the time, Texas, the Longhorns didn't have, they had black players, but didn't have as many as some other schools. But he went out there, and Darrell Royal, the legendary coach, who's synonymous with Texas Longhorn football, Darrell Royal was the coach at the time. And as it turns out, Earl and Darrell Royal developed a extremely close relationship, almost father and son relationship. Darrell Royal and his wife, extreme to this day, still very close to Earl Cambell. They're family to him. Personally, I fell in love with this guy, Earl Cambell. I remember watching him in college when he went to play for the University of Texas. And he played for Darrell Royal up until, I believe, I can't remember the exact year, but the team was, I think, 5-1, and Darrell Royal decided to step down. It was his worst record he had in forever. And he'd been there like 32 years as a coach. And one of his assistants, Fred Akers, became the coach. And the team was phenomenal. I mean, I believe Earl rushed for over 1,700 yards. And when they won the the old Southwest Conference, the old Southwest Conference was wild. It was every school was from Texas except for Arkansas. So you had Rice, TCU, A&M, Texas, Arkansas, Baylor, Texas Tech. I believe there was also, I think the Houston Cougars were in there, and so was Rice. Those 9 schools. I believe it was 9 schools. And if I'm missing one, they weren't important anyway. No, I think I got them all. Anyhow, so they win the conference his senior year, and they play against who? Notre Dame. And who was quarterback of Notre Dame that year? Joe Montana. And of course, I was rooting for the Horns to beat them. TCU's the other one, which is ironic because they're my favorite team. And SMU. Oh my God, what am I thinking? Okay, now I got to rattle them off again. All right. Arkansas, SMU, TCU, Texas Tech, Baylor, Texas A&M, Houston, Rice. Anyway, I digress. So they lose. They lose to Notre Dame and Joe Montana. And Joe Montana had a hell of a Cotton Bowl career because he played against the Cougars one year, and they were losing by a country mile, and slowly, boom, 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 catches up, and then he beats the Houston Cougars. Anyway, so he wins. Earl Cambell, senior year, wins the Heisman Trophy. And I believe it was the first year they really hyped it up. They had all the guys that were picked, top 4 guys, put them in, sat them down and had a little bit of a ceremony to what it is today. I mean, that was the beginning of all of that. And he won the award. So Houston Oilers got the draft pick, had the draft pick, and I believe there was a draft trade with it slips my mind, either Seattle or Tampa. I can't remember which of the two. Anyway, they're the first pick. They pick him, and then they sign him up. One of the things that I remember very vividly at the time, this was before the 78 season, his rookie year. I remember the big story that he had bought his mom a house. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. Here's a guy who buys a house for his mom. First thing I had ever heard. And that's not to say that it hadn't been done before. It was the first time I'd ever heard somebody do that on this level. And I just thought, man, he is such a cool guy for doing that. Turns out, as I read the book, the house was built on a property right where the original house was and still is. And so his family had, so I thought that was, upon reading that, I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. It wasn't like they moved to another neighborhood. His mom, Ann, an amazing lady, an amazing woman who gave him the foundation of who he is. He won an award for alumnus for the Texas, they call them Tex X's. And I was looking online, and he talked about there were some people that were involved that made his life. One, God; two, his mom, and then so on and so forth. But I've always thought it was cool that he had that relationship. One of the things, by the way, when he was playing for the University of Texas, there were 2 players that that were friends of his that came to mind. One that both of them I saw playing pro ball. Um Roosevelt Leaks, who was a running back that held the running back position before Earl got there and kind of showed him the ropes of college ball. Roosevelt Leaks played for the Baltimore Colts for a few years. And then the other player who was actually a pretty damn good player, and that was Raymond Claiborne. And he was a defensive back for the Baltimore. I was going to say Boston, but it came out as Baltimore. The New England Patriots. He was a defensive back, and he played for quite a few years. He's actually a really good defensive back. And so the book goes through his college years, then it goes into the Houston Oilers years. And he really came onto the scene, and I remember it. Ironically, I'm recording this on the 15th of November. 5 more days, and it'll be 42 years. Can you believe it? The game that put Luv Ya Blue on the map, and that was against Miami, Monday night. If you ever get to see that game on YouTube, I just get pumped. 50,000 plus shaking their little pom poms, chant, singing along with the little tune they used to play at the stadium, where he got 199 yards, 4 touchdowns. And I saw an interview with him and Dan Pastorini, who was the quarterback at the time, who said, I whatever the play was called, handed it off to Earl. He was just supposed to run around the side. They figured he was just going to go down a few yards. Boom, 87 yards. And that was just, it's considered one of the all-time great Monday Night Football games. And as an Oiler fan, I'm always excited to see that one. And it's just amazing. And then they start talking about through the years as an Oiler, the tough times playing against the Steelers, which were rock'em sock'em games. I mean, just bam, hitting each other like no tomorrow. But they actually liked each other. Some of the players that actually did like each other. That time they went to the first conference championship against the Steelers. They lost 34-5. I was watching it in my parents' family room. I remember it. I mean, as I'm telling you this, I'm remembering sitting in front of the big giant furniture type television that we had, and just being bummed out that he lost by almost 30 points. But it was a terrible weather game. It was raining. It was just icy. And then Pittsburgh goes and beats the Cowboys in the Super Bowl. Then the next year, it's like, this is the one. This is the one. And they go in and they go back to Pittsburgh. And it's the famous one. It's the play why we have replay. And if you go online for Houston Oilers robbed of a touchdown against Pittsburgh, you'll see it when Dan Pastorini throws a ball to Mike Renfro, TCU great. Should do this because this is Longhorns, and you know what this is? Texas Tech. Actually, it's like this, I think. Anyway, I digress. So he throws the ball. Mike Renfro catches it, puts 2 feet in the ground, and gets knocked down. And they call it out of bounds. The referees come out, they check it, boom, 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 boom. To this day, I mean, I remember the stupid ref's name is Jim Tunney. Why? Because I was so pissed. And Steelers go on and beat the Rams in the Super Bowl. And so that's two teams in twice, 2 conference championships, and Pittsburgh goes on to the Super Bowl and wins it. So this is where it gets a little crazy, because I'm a hardcore Oiler fan, but I hated the owner. I couldn't stand the owner, Bud Adams. Now, in this book, I find out, I mean, here I am, a hardcore Oiler fan, and I find out in this book, and it just, just disappointed me. they had this, can't remember his position. He wasn't necessarily GM because Bum was given that position formally or informally, I guess you could say. And he had made a trade for Pastorini to the Raiders for Kenny Stabler, Snake Stabler. And Lad Herzeg was an executive on the team who kept talking to the owner like, hey, Bum's become a bigger star than you are. Oh, that's not good. Oh. And Bum had a coach named Ed Biles. I believe he was a defensive coach who kind of threw wood on the fire on this Lad Herzeg situation. And it turns out Greg Bingham, who was a linebacker, who I thought he was pretty good and didn't think anything of it. Turns out he was kind of a Benedict Arnold, always like, okay, this is what's going on. This is what was said to Lad Herzeg. And those three basically helped the owner get him all riled up so that whenever the Houston Oilers they had another great year in 80 with the Snake Stabler. And they get to before I go to the wild card game, just to give you an idea of the kind of relation, Bum had a fantastic relationship with his players. And it was pretty down to earth. I mean, if you ever learned anything about Bum Phillips, and maybe you don't, you need to find out. He was a good man. His name was O.A. Phillips, or Ole A. Phillips. I can't remember what the A stands for, but he was called Bum because his sister named him that when they were young. And Bum got to the Oilers through San Diego, the Chargers, when he was coaching for Sid Gilman. And Sid came to the Oilers and brought Bum with him. Anyway, Bum was a real down-to-earth guy, and players loved playing for Bum. They would run through a brick wall. And Earl had a fantastic relationship with Bum. Well, Snake Stabler comes into the scene, and he's kind of a Southern guy himself. I mean, he played in Alabama, and he was he's from, and he's still, before he passed away, he was living in Alabama. So there was a game against the Jets, and the Jets were up like 28-7. It turns out the night before, Stabler and Bum had gone out to drink. And, they had a good time drinking. So, first half, Stabler says he had a hangover. And he woke up from his hangover in the second half. So he helps them get 3 touchdowns to tie the game to put it in overtime. They lose the toss, the Jets drive, and they win. Now, recently I watched the game, and the Oilers they actually should have won. The reason why they didn't, granted, Stabler did a hell of a job in catching up and getting him to tie the game. The problem was there were several times they went for 4th and long. They decided to either go for 4th and long and not kick a field goal. Why? Because the kicker was hurt and Ted Thompson was kicking, and he's a linebacker. And I remember he had this shoe, and he would kick straight up, not soccer style. And that was a reason why there were several points that could have been made by field goals that they never did. Anyway, had to mention that. So now, fast forward to that 1980s wildcard game. And Earl, he did okay. They lose 20-7, I believe it was, in the wild card game. And they had a great team. It was 11-5. And with the little triumvirate of Benedict Arnolds, they convinced Bud Adams to fire Bum. And which, pun intended, I was bummed out. And Earl was too. In the book, he talks about how upset he was because of the closeness he felt with him. But he was always, team player, and I'm going to do the right thing. And eventually, when Bum's gone, Ed Biles comes in, and Ed Biles sucks. He was horrible. They go like 8-23 in the 31 games he coached. And after that, Bud Adams goes, "Holy crap, what did I just do?" And he realized in the book it said he made a major faux pas. Well, yeah. And but 2 weeks later, get a load of this. 2 weeks later, Bum gets hired by Tom Benson of the New Orleans Saints. Tom Benson was an auto dealership guy out of San Antonio, and he was the owner of the New Orleans Saints. So he brings him there, and a few years, I think it was like a couple of years later, Earl sees the writing on the wall because they hired the Hugh Campbell, formerly of the Edmonton Eskimos, where Warren Moon was playing. Warren Moon, when he graduated from college out of the University of Washington, had been told, "Well, you can play receiver." He's like, "Screw you, I'm playing quarterback." So he got a chance to play in Canada and won 5 Grey Cups, which is their championship game with the Edmonton Eskimos. So Bud Adams decides the best way to get him to sign up with us is to have Hugh Campbell sign up as coach. And it wasn't long before Earl realized these guys really don't want me around. He played a year with Warren, and then they traded him. They traded him to New Orleans. Now the New Orleans fans weren't all that thrilled by that trade because they go, "We have Rodgers, George Rodgers, who was a pretty good running back for New Orleans, and eventually went to Washington." And so there was the fans and the media didn't like either one, Bum or Earl. And I remember being disappointed seeing Earl playing in New Orleans uniform. But he did his best and played, I believe, 2 years. And it was a preseason of the year that Jim Mora takes over, because they fired Bum. And Jim Mora comes in. Is it Jim Mora? Mora. I always get the Moras confused because his son is Jim Mora. I always get the names. Anyway, Coach Mora. He's the one that's infamous for the playoffs. That's the guy, right? So he's a coach of New Orleans, and in the preseason, there was a game against the Patriots. After the game, he calls his mom. His mom's asleep, talks to his brother, say, "Hey, I just called. Don't wake up Mom. I just wanted to tell her that I was going to be retiring, and I wanted her to know." And he called Coach Royal, and he called a couple other folks that were very close to him before he would announce it. So he goes to the running back coach, tells Mora, and then they talk to the owner, the GM at the time, and then they talk to the owner, Tom Benson, and he's just like, "I've already made my mind. I've already made my mind. So they do a small little press conference with ESPN so he could announce his retirement. It was short and sweet. Turns out, running back coach tells him a little bit later, "It's probably a good thing that you did that because Coach Mora was going to go ahead and release you." So he was able to leave on his own terms. And fast forward, they talk a little bit about his anxiety issues and some of his health issues. Earl's body was beat to the heck because of the way he played, but he also had some health issues. And later on, he got voted into the Hall of Fame. And who, what's the name? Bum Phillips does the opening, introduces Earl, and then Earl comes up to talk, and he doesn't talk too much. He's a humble man. And so he's a Hall of Famer, the Hall of Famer Earl Cambell. And later on, he talks to these 2-3 gentlemen that connect to him about doing business, and they want to do business. I think they were talking about industrial waste. And he's like, I don't want to deal with industrial waste. What are people going to think about me in Austin? Because it was going to be in Austin, right? And in the conversation, he starts talking about, I make a pretty good sausage and ribs or something. And that was the beginning of Earl Cambell Sausage, Earl Cambell Foods. And if you're in Texas, you got to try those. They're extremely good. But anyway, I could ramble on and on. I love Earl Cambell. And I know there's a lot of people who do. And he's a damn good man. Let me make sure I didn't forget anything, because that's why I put in a few notes in here, just to make sure. By the way, the Raiders that beat them in the wild card game, they win the Super Bowl, and that's the one they beat the Philadelphia Eagles 27-10 in the New Orleans Superdome. And Kenny King, he was a running back that had been with the Oilers, ended up with the Raiders. It was actually 24-7, not 20-7. Yeah, I think I got everything that I wanted to mention. Now, the other thing is that when those trades were happening with Bum and bringing players in, another player was the Ghost, Dave Casper. And they just thought it was the last few pieces to take the team to the Super Bowl. But think about it. They lost to 3 different teams in a row that ended up winning the Super Bowl. I mean, if you're going to lose, you might as well lose to the guys that win the whole thing, right? Anyway, it's called The Tyler Rose, The Earl Cambell Story. My favorite football player, period. Now, I love a lot of other players like Walter Payton, but Earl was always my favorite, and it was such a cool read. It's an easy read. You could tell the guy's a big fan of his. So I wouldn't call it fanboy writing, but it's an easy read. And if you love football, it's a good book to have. If you love Earl Cambell, give it a shot. And it truly, not that I needed to be reminded of it, but Earl Campbell's a good man, and I will always feel that way. And it just reiterated that. So that is the book report today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.